Good afternoon and welcome to our program. I'm the Reverend Stephanie Fox, Associate Director of Programs for the Arkansas House of Prayer. And I'm delighted to welcome you to this presentation with Dr. Barris. The Arkansas House of Prayer is an interfaith haven set apart in nature, dedicated to contemplative prayer, meditation, and quiet, where all are welcome. Arkansas House of Prayer is an outreach of the Episcopal Diocese of Arkansas and St. Margaret's Episcopal Church. We're located on Chenal Drive in West Little Rock, next to St. Margaret's Episcopal Church. Our program is being recorded today for the purpose of sharing this information with others. If you do not wish your image to appear, turn off your video. Today I will be running Zoom on the technical end of our program. Please keep yourself on mute unless you have a question. Questions and comments can also be shared in the chat box. And toward the end of our program, I will put a link for a survey. I will put my cell number in the chat box. If you have a technical issue, you can text me. And I do encourage you at the end to please complete the survey because it helps us to better plan for future programs. Thank you and welcome. And we invite you to visit the Arkansas House of Prayer and to tour our beautiful buildings and ground sometime soon. And I am delighted to introduce Dr. Robert Barris, and I will let him share his wisdom and teaching with us today. Thank you so much for joining us.
Well, I'm thrilled to be here. And, you know, it was just moments ago feeling like I was meeting up with old friends. But then I thought to myself, you know, I don't know you guys a long time. I was so fortunate and blessed to have presented once before. So it was kind of kicking around, what is it that's fostering that sense of I'm meeting up with old friends? And what came to me was, you know, there's two words that seem kind of similar and are different. And I think it speaks to the Arkansas House of Prayer. You know, there's tolerance and there's toleration. And as I understand it, I'm not sure if there's a pat right or wrong answer. You know, tolerance can be something that you put up with. You know, I might have to tolerate that loud noise if I'm on a service phone call and I am told to be put on hold and they play annoying music. I might have to tolerate it. But toleration, as I understand it, or as I understand the Arkansas House of Prayer, is not just putting up with differences, but really more of a deep embrace of, a real celebration of. And not that we're trying to do anything to have anyone join and ascribe to my religion or my way of thinking at all, but more of a sharing in such a beautiful way. Have a taste of what is sweet to me. And I'd also like to taste what's sweet to you. So in that way, it's so much more profound than.
Sorry, we lost your sound. Dr. Barris, we lost your sound. Sorry.
How did that happen?
My fault.
I think as I understand the Arkansas House of Prayer, it's more of a deep connecting with and deep desire to get to know the other person and taste of what works for them spiritually and mutually so. And that way I am so happy to be here and I feel like I'm meeting up with old friends. And for the invite, I'm always grateful, Reverend Stephanie and Emily, Annabelle, Sister Deborah. So I thought I would entitle my talk today, and I'll explain how it's going to be structured in a moment. Going out of my head over you with a capital Y. And maybe some of you are old R&B buffs and remember that old song, Going Out of My Head Over You by Little Anthony and the Imperials. But why I entitled it Going Out of My Head Over You is that to really connect with the divine, sometimes it seems to me that we have to kind of get out of the way of our, and make space from that thinking, analyzing, figuring it out kind of mind. How many times people will say, you know, I'd be more observant if people could just answer certain questions for me. Like, why did that child have to suffer terribly? Or why the Holocaust? Or why there's so many why questions. And once those are answered for me, then I could be a person of faith. I could ascribe to this religion or that religion. But the truth is, when do we ever have it all figured out? And those deep questions, when are they ever answered? Probably never. And the deeper the question, the more unlikely it'll be to ever be resolved or answered for you. So if you're going to wait until that day, it's not going to happen. So the spiritual practice often, as I understand it, and what I'm hoping to speak to today, in going out of my head over you, is practices that kind of circumvent that analyzing, thinking mind, and instead drop into heartfulness practice and embodied practice. So that's your kind of agenda. And so in the first half of our time together, I'm hoping to do a sitting practice that's sort of heartfulness based. And maybe then take a break for some dialogue. And then maybe the second half, do some actually mindful movement together, and then speak about that. So the heart, the body, those are the areas that we're especially going to speak to, rather than that analyzing, thinking part of ourselves, if that's okay. So let's start with a sit, if that's okay. So coming to a comfortable seated position, with your hands on your laps and your feet comfortably on the floor. And maybe just taking a moment to drop into the breath. So in the practice today, let's follow the breath right into the heart itself. Kind of putting aside what we were taught in terms of physiology, that the breath goes through the nostrils, down the trachea, the bronchioles, into the lungs. But almost as if we could follow that breath right into the center of the chest, right into that heart place. What was referred to by Rumi in one of his poems as that freshness held there in the center of the chest. So in this practice, and in this breathing practice, we breathe into the heart in the spirit of cultivating a certain don't-know mind approach. That there's so much that we're never going to figure out. So instead, we take that breath and we breathe it into the heart. That acknowledging that the brain does remarkable things and figuring things out. And, you know, I got so panic stricken, I had to sign on to the Zoom link, and I'm so non-technological. But thank God I was able to do that. And thank God for our minds assisting us with that. That, of course, in the support of yourself, Stephanie. But in other ways, though, the mind feels so limited, tiny, and fragile. Especially in issues such as suffering. Why did that child have to suffer? So many why questions. But instead, we breathe it into the enormity of the heart. Understanding that as much as the brain is finite, is limited, there's a certain infinitude to the heart, that the heart could hold it all. So with every single breath then, fueling that heart space. Almost with every breath, as if the heart is becoming larger, maybe more red in its color, more luminescent and shimmering, expanding and expanding to fill the whole chest cavity. This enormous beating heart of mercy and passion and compassion and love. You know, it's hard to live with your heart wide open, because then it's an invitation to open to the entirety of life, the good, the bad, and the ugly. And that isn't as easy all the time at all. For the good stuff, great, I just have a totally open heart. But what about the heavy stuff? And it's so tempting then to live with a heart shut tight, with layer upon layer upon layer of sedimentation and armoring, protecting of it. But what I've discovered, and maybe you as well, is that as much as it can be so painful to embrace that tenderness of a wide open heart, I've found that it's even that much more painful to live with a heart shut tight. So with every breath, taking it right into the center of the chest. And with that, allowing for the sense of that incrustation, that sedimentation over years and years of protectiveness, slowly, slowly dissipating. You know, just instinctively, as I was saying that, I actually placed my hand over the chest, over the heart. And if that's your desire, definitely feel welcome to do that, just to further heighten that sense of deep connectedness with that heart space. So right now, I've simply placed my palm right over the heart itself. And with that, a sense of layer upon layer being melted away. And that with a heart shut tight, or barely open, barely alive, then when the heart door shuts even more, it's barely perceptible. But if your heart is flung wide open and the doors, the gates wide, wide open, and then there's a closure, it feels that much more perceptible and maybe that much more painful. And in the spirit of open-heartedness then, at times questions beginning with the word why seem less germane, because already we know that they may not even be answerable. Rather, better questions might include ones such as not why this, why that, but given the current circumstances, whatever they might be, how then should I respond? Or if you're a person of faith, or even not of faith, a person of faith might ask, what does God want from me? How does God want me to respond right now? And not radically different for a person not of faith. What's called upon for me right now? And what's needed for me to respond from a place of compassion, kindness, of tenderness. So the thinking mind might then assist in what ways can I be of help? That's true. But that deep prevailing sentiment of, I just feel this burning need to respond. And response could be something as seemingly, so to speak, simple as an embrace, a phone call, even a smile. In terms of understanding and why questions, it's true, and my experience has been that sometimes when I just don't understand, there are things that a week later or a month later, a year later, a decade later, I could look back and, now I understand why that had to be the way it did. But at the same time, and as much as that could challenge our faith, suspending and waiting for an answer for a day, a week, a month, a year, a decade, 25 years, who knows, who knows? And as challenging as that could be for our faith, far more challenging are those questions that we already know there's never going to be an answer to. And anybody suggesting an answer for us would just be hurtful and offensive. So we just take it into that enormous heart that drinks from all this, the good, the bad, but equally so, the pain, the suffering, and has room to embrace it all. So if your hand was on your chest, when you're comfortable with it, you could allow it to fall back down on your lap. But what so often surprises me, and maybe it'll be your experience now, I don't know, that even with the hand back down on the lap, there still feels, in my experience right this moment, more of this spaciousness, more of this vibrancy right there in the center of the chest, even with the hand no longer making contact. Almost like as we've peeled away those layers of protective armoring from all our hurts, all our moments of being disappointed or shamed. But once we bravely and courageously open that heart, discovering almost this whirl of luminescence, exposing our shimmering nature, always there, just waiting. Just waiting for us to employ certain practices that just take that which is always there, but maybe buried beneath the surface of awareness, and just exposing that which perhaps has always been there, perhaps our birthright, really, as a living, breathing human being. Sometimes I just, once again, I've mentioned it already, almost suspending everything I learned in medical school about you breathe. It goes through the nostril, the mouth, and down the back of the throat, the pharynx, the larynx, to the lungs. But in this kind of practice, often I just feel like there's this big portal right there in the center of the chest, wide open, flung open, the gates wide open to whatever it is. And as if I could breathe straight into the heart itself, that there's direct access right there. And I believe it transcends words. That the other individual may or may not be able to articulate it, but I think can intuit when there's a sense of that kind of heartful presence and openness. Just resting in that acknowledgement that there's certain things that we're never ever going to understand. It's true that the prophet Isaiah said it. I think it was chapter 55, my thoughts are not your thoughts, and my ways are not your ways. And what's amazing to me is almost parroting the prophets are quantum physics experts today, quantum mechanics. So is a wave a particle? Absolutely. Is it a wave? Oh, yeah, absolutely. Well, which one is it? Is it this or is it that? And the answer is both. And if you say to the quantum mechanics physicist, but that makes no sense at all, they'll say exactly. I love the expression by a remarkable scientist and theologian, I'd have to say. I love his stuff, love his writings, his podcasts. Professor Michael Gillen, you might have heard of. No slouch, he was a professor of physics and mathematics and astronomy at Harvard. Also has a whole bunch of Emmy Awards under his belt, but happens to be a devout Christian. And the way he put it is, for something that's a trivial truth, the opposite is absolutely false. If you say today's Tuesday, well, no, it's not. It's Sunday. It's just wrong. It's false. And that's very true for trivial truths. But he continues. When it comes to profound truths, the more the profundity in that profound truth, the more it's such that the exact opposite is equally true. So we can never wrap our minds around any of that. And we just affirm that our finite minds will never grasp that which is infinite. And for that reason, we just breathe straight into the infinitude of our hearts. For this segment, I thought I'd close with a lovely piece by the thinker, philosopher, poet, Rilke. One of my favorite quotes. He was writing to a young student. Be patient toward all that is unsolved in your heart, and try to love the questions themselves, like locked rooms and like books that are now written in a very foreign tongue. Do not now seek the answers which cannot be given you, because you would not be able to live them. And the point is to live everything. Live the questions now. Perhaps you will then gradually, without noticing it, live along some distant day into the answer. But I would just add that at the same time, knowing that there's the deeper questions that we know will never live into understanding. And that's where the courage of living comes in. I love the fact that courage derives from the Romance languages. Cœur in French is heart, corazon in Spanish, or in English, the study of the heart is cardiology. So having the courage, that heartfulness to live our lives, notwithstanding deep and piercing questions, and just knowing that there'll never be an answer, but I'm going to persevere and respond in the way that I'm called to. Let's just sit with this for another moment or two. So if your eyes were closed, when you're comfortable with it, allowing them to open and to slowly come back to the room. So I thought if people are okay with it, have a conversation at this point about this practice. And then maybe we'll segue into the second half. And maybe to kind of jumpstart, or you could say give a kickoff to the conversation, maybe a good question might be, what is it like to live with questions that are so difficult, barely answerable, and maybe not answerable? And what is that like for you? Or what was the practice like, your direct experience doing the practice today? So I'd love to open it up and hear from you guys, but don't forget to unmute. I don't know if that's a good sign or a bad sign.
I found it very calming to pay attention to my breath and my heart at the same time. And this tension in the back of my shoulders kind of relaxed. And after, I don't know, it's pretty near the beginning, but not right at the beginning, I sat more comfortably in the chair, still straight, but so I could feel the experience not just in my head or my heart, but in my whole body. And I think the questions that I live with that can't be answered, or maybe the questions that are facing all of us as human beings these days, and they have to do with how do we manage what's happening to our earth, the climate issues. We have opposing opinions, but either side is not able to come to a definite procedure by which we might start to make a difference, or our political separations. How do we reach a point where we can listen respectfully to opinions that differ from ours, without needing, the heart isn't saying you're wrong, go away. The heart is just there. So that's the kind of thing that came to my mind when you asked both my experience, and then when you asked about the questions that I went last night to a Zoom baby shower for a dear friend's first great-grandchild. And I thought about the hope and the joy that this family is experiencing. And I just wanted so much for this world to be a place that family can raise their children in joy and faith and in hope.
Well, first of all, you said so many spectacularly, stunningly beautiful things, and I thank you for all that. And what's your name? I'm sorry?
I'm Catherine.
Catherine. Well, a couple to unpack just a couple of the amazing points. One was there's such wisdom in the body itself, if we just make space for that. So just, I guess, as you kind of went into a certain space, the body itself kind of corrected. It's not like you had to then analyze, left shoulder drop a bit. There just seemed to be an inherent wisdom in the body if we make space for that to occur. It's so overwhelming, everything in the world and the news and everything. And it could lead to a feeling of what's the point of anything, and just defeatism, God forbid. Maybe that's why one reason of the many why I think the Arkansas House of Prayer is so remarkable, because there is such divisiveness. You're right. But here we are all sitting together, and I like to think that what we're doing now is something not just, nice and laudatory, but sacred and holy. The people of different faiths, and I'm sure there's at least 2, 3, 4 faiths of us in the sit right now, and we're just embracing each other. And it's almost like a prayer that I have, that may it ripple out, that this little tiny thing that we're doing right now, almost like in concentric circles, may it spread and spread and spread into this like gigantic tidal wave. And maybe that's the power of meditation, because, in the sitting, people can tap into any tradition they want to make it tweak or most resonate for them. And who cares? But we're sitting there together in sacred space. And maybe that's what we're doing right now. And it's almost like a prayer we're offering right now, Catherine. May it be that this little sacred space that we're in right now, may it ripple and ripple and ripple. And it may be that in this room right now, there's many religions and people of very, very different political persuasions. I'm quite sure of that as well. But right now, who cares? We're just being together and embracing each other. And how spectacular and stunning. I think holy is really the word. I apologize, but holy. And so often a driving force is, in the scriptural book, Ethics of the Fathers, one of the teachings is that the work is so great, but we're never exempt from doing our part. So I know that if I could just do a fraction of a fraction of a fraction, what I was put on this planet to do. But if we all did that, how awesome that would be. So never allowing to go into despair. And I thank you for all that, Catherine. I see, is the video still working, Steffi? I see just Emily's name. There we go. Catherine, thank you for that.
Some people enter just with their names without video.
Okay. Well, that's fine. The video was getting a bit, but we're good again. Anybody else? Thank you so much, Catherine.
Sure. I'm Keisha, and I guess after the fighting, the battle of shutting my brain off, or trying to, after a while of just nothingness, it gave my mind, my imagination, whatever, just permission to kind of run wild. And I envisioned this, just my heart, and as you were speaking, like the blood running through as the, breath was coming into it, and it just becoming more vibrant. But I guess coming from a place of being stone, but as the breath was coming into it, it was becoming more flesh. But for some reason, there are like pieces of just stone that were deeply embedded into the heart that just couldn't be reached. And so just as I just kind of focused in on that picture, it just felt like there's only so much that I could do personally to have a healthy heart, right? Like, yeah, within my own hands, but then there are some things that are just way too deep, that I can't see, that I can't reach, that I have to give away.
What do you mean by give away? I'm not sure what you mean by that.
Like my heart, just to give my heart into the hands of God so that he can do that, reach the parts that I can't reach. Don't know the depths of the fragments that are there, don't know how many pieces there are, but it's just uncomfortable meshed with the flesh and that's what I was envisioning. And because I think for myself, I always try to do things myself to try to make myself okay. But as I was just envisioning that, I was like, no, there are some things that I just can't do. And by sitting and being, you just have to let someone else do the work that you can't do to be healthy. Because I'm very much a doer. I'm very much like a task person. And it's hard for me to just sit and be and let someone else do the work. So yeah, that's how my time went.
Well, that's pretty awesome. And you said a lot, just a couple of comments, because you said so much. And anyone who just starts any sort of contemplative or meditative practice probably gets their first insight in the first millisecond. When they say, quiet in the minds, oh my God, it's a racket up there. Within a second, I thought I was, just stay silent. And then within a millisecond, what's for dinner? I wonder what time the Super Bowl is on. Who am I going to hope for? What a racket. And that's always the first, at least for me, the very first insight. But I wouldn't use the word battle though, because we soften to that. We make space with a certain gentleness, and not, behave yourself, and I'm focusing on the breath, and, get in place. And so I loved everything you said. I wouldn't use the word battle as much as a gentle re-escorting when our
Mm.
mind drifts a little bit. And you're right, there is that sense of like a heart of stone. And I might have been in the book of Proverbs where they talked about the metaphor of, just tiny drop after drop of water over time erode that heart of stone. So the trick of the practice, as I see it, is not to practice once, even for an extended 6-hour intensive, and then that be that. Better to practice, 5 minutes a day or 1 breath a day, but just to keep on going, keep on practicing. And just like it suggests in Proverbs, that drop by drop by drop, slowly, with patience and tenderness, does the eroding. And you said something else that was spectacular because, in most often, if you use the word submission, it's thought in a very, very negative way, to submit. I'm going to make you submit, as if I have power over you. And that kind of submission is not a pleasant one at all, to unwillingly be forced to submit. But there's a different kind of submission that I think you're talking about, if I'm not mistaken, Keisha, and that's a willing submission. And the willing submission is to God, as you put it. God, take my heart, open my heart, God. I'm submitting to something so much greater than myself. And that kind of submission isn't forced or unpleasant or traumatizing. It's sacred submission.
Yeah.
So what was it like during the practice, Keisha, that sense of submission? What did that feel like for you? If you don't mind, if that's okay asking.
It was a little difficult at first. I think kind of trying to wrap my mind around it. Because as I envisioned the stones and things, I started thinking about, well, how can I get to it?
Yeah.
And but then as I envisioned giving it away, in the process, I was still trying to figure out what was going to happen, where it was going to lead to. And, but eventually there was just nothing I could do. And then that was just it was peaceful. It was rest. There's nothing what else is there to think about? What is there to do? Especially if it's not in my hands. It's like going into surgery.
You give it to somebody, you've already given it to someone else's hands, right? So you're
right. Like I'm
Awesome.
under anesthesia. There's nothing I can do. Yeah. So it was just restful.
It's sort of like a free fall, a spiritual practice. You might use the metaphor of, climbing that ladder spiritually, but sometimes the metaphors are more like a descending into or a falling and not knowing where you're going to land.
Right.
Except knowing that there's those hands that are there waiting to catch you, to take you in, to embrace you, but just dropping and falling and not knowing where is this going to take me, like getting lost in a deep prayer service, or lost in contemplation, or lost in in sacred song, and just sort of feel like you've lost yourself. Could be scary, like going into anesthesia. Where's this? I'm losing control.
Mm-hmm.
But the only way it's possible, I think, is, as you said, that kind of willing submission and knowing that there's those hands just waiting, always are waiting to catch me.
Yeah.
How lovely. Thank you. Anybody else?
Well, I just wanted to say one thing, Keisha. When you were talking, I remembered the biblical promise that God made, and I don't know exactly what book it's in, but he promised that he would take our hearts of stone and give us hearts of flesh. So I kept remembering that when you talked about that there was still stones in your heart, that it's just not finished yet, this heart of flesh, but it's promised.
I saw another hand. If you want to raise it again, there we are. Thank you. Here we go.
It's from Ezekiel.
Okay.
Hello, and thank you for the practice. You know, I had a little bit of trouble in the practice because it was like my conceptual mind kept going in the engagement in the dialogue. I didn't feel I had the you know, I couldn't be in the kind of the tension of letting my mind hold still and kind of dropping, descending in this hidden access, because my mind was going through the practice, and I'm just like just some of the embodied prompts of you know, just feeling the breath go in. I was able to do that, but my mind, it was like I was going this way, you know, instead of dropping down. Do you have any thoughts on that?
Yeah. By the way, before I do, you know, I always complain about the smartphone and how I hate it, and then I'll say, "Oh, and thank you, Sister Deborah, Ezekiel." It's such a love-hate thing I have with these smartphones. You could pull up a Rilke quote in a millisecond or source in Ezekiel, and I'm such a hypocrite because I say these smartphones are so killing us. Well, you know, or first of all, thank you. Your name's Nancy, I think. I take it slow. And I think it was with faith and trust that you sort of show up to do the practice, not knowing where it's going to take you. That's that kind of falling sense. But just showing up again and again and again. But always with a gentleness. And never berating myself, you know, I'm such a bad meditator, or my prayer practice is so horrible. I'm never going to be spiritual. We never beat ourselves up. It always has to be with a softness, a gentleness, a self-compassion. Sometimes we could be forgiving to the whole world, except for that one person, our own selves. You know, I can't believe I messed up. I'm so stupid. We could forgive this one and that one, but not ourselves. So when my mind wanders, and that's just the way minds are. It's just the way they're wired. And now scientists in my field now call it the default network mode in neurology, neurobiology, that the brain is always chattering away, and that's its default position, it appears. So we do the practice. And even if it is such that my mind wanders 10,000 times in that 1 minute, then the practice is just escorting myself back to that practice 10,000 times, but always in a spirit of gentleness. And in terms of awareness, the same way we could be aware of breath, we could be equally aware by being aware that our mind has wandered and we've returned it to the practice. So that in of itself can then be awareness practice. So always with a gentleness. And I guess just showing up and showing up. You know, I've been practicing meditation a very long time. And I think they just hit a point where it started to resonate. There's a book by Malcolm Gladwell. He's written a lot of cool books. One was The Tipping Point, and once you've done something like 10,000 times or 10,000 hours, and you know, then something just kind of resonates. So I think I don't think anyone's keeping count of how many minutes one meditated and that you hit 10,000 hours or this or that. But I think the point being that just showing up with an attitude of curiosity, openness, and maybe trust that we have predecessors on the spiritual path that have told us, you know, and there's many wonderful paths with those predecessors, Jewish predecessor, predecessors, Christian mystics, Muslim mystics, Sufi mystics, etc., etc. Every path has those who've preceded us and have told us in their wisdom that just keep showing up and showing up. And that's all I've done. And then left myself open to that mystery, come what may. But if we try to force things, but then there's ego involved. And anytime you bring, I think, ego into the practice, it's a recipe for failure. Anytime we say to ourselves, it's a biblical quote. I'm trying to think how one would translate kochi v'otzem yadi into English. Kochi, through my might and the strength of my hand have I achieved such and such. It's a biblical quote. Anyone with a smartphone, no doubt, can reference it and soon enough. But anytime we say that, you know, through my actions and my talents and my this and my that, did I succeed? You're so far from the spiritual path. So we suspend our egos and just open to the mystery. That's all I've tried to do. And, you know, but it sounds like that's exactly what you're saying as well, Nancy, and that's what you're trying to do. Anybody else?
I'd like to say something. I don't know how to raise your hand on a Zoom, so I just interrupted.
Well, you're on, Mary.
Okay. For the last 3 or 4 years, I have been dealing with a heart condition. I have had 2 stents and I've had a pacemaker, and recently had a thing of angina. But it has made me so aware of and conscious of my heart as this organ in my body, and to allow my mind to fall back behind my heart has become something I really physically can experience more. I don't wish this for anyone to have a heart problem, but I'm so sort of grateful for this new deep awareness of my heart and consciousness of it, and its amazing function physically. And that has led me to really appreciate its function spiritually as well. So if anybody out there has heart problem, it can be a blessing in a way. So I don't want you to have one, but
I guess on many layers, then you're tending to your heart, you could say.
yes.
And looking for healing on the physical plane, but maybe the calling is for a deeper healing as well.
Absolutely. Yes, absolutely. And I was thinking when Keisha gave that wonderful image of her heart,
Yeah.
you know, I thought, yes, Keisha, you know, I think the imagination can be very helpful in leading us deeper. And so anyhow, I'm done.
We should be healed on every level. You know, you should be well medically, but even the deeper healing that we all took birth for. Yeah.
I think I sort of feel the same in an odd way. I don't know, you're a physician, so I don't know. But they, you know, they don't separate like they're different things. It's sort of all together.
I like to see things as seamless.
Yes, seamless.
You know, which is perfect timing in terms of segueing. I did want to do some movement, mindful movement, if that's
Good.
okay. Yeah, everyone's cool with that? Because this seems like a pretty cool group. So let's do this. I'm going to teach, if I could, some very basic, simple standing Qigong movement. I'm very fortunate. I live in Flushing, Queens, not very far from the Queens Botanical Garden, just about a mile away. And every morning, early in the morning, hundreds of individuals come, mostly Asian, to practice Tai Chi and Qigong. And I always wanted to learn. So I just showed up and just threw myself into it. And everyone was like, you know, who's this guy? But I don't care. And they were so inviting to me. So let's if you guys are cool with it, let's stand up. It'll be very gentle, by the way, so you don't have to be nervous. And I'm going to tilt my computer screen just a little bit, if that's okay. And you might want to do the same. Let's see how we could, we're ad-libbing. There we go. So we're going to do some very simple standing Qigong. And we don't have the luxury because we only have the screen and all. But the first is just called rise and fall. So I'm inhaling on the way up. And I'm exhaling on the way down. Inhaling. So each of these moves, we're not going to do too many of them. There's a whole series, a whole sequence, but each is coordinated with the breath. So in this one, it's pretty clear, inhaling on the way up and exhaling on the way down. On the way up, I'm sort of leading with my wrists, almost like they're spontaneously floating. Not even so much that I'm moving my arms or moving my wrists. It's more like they're just spontaneously being moved. So I'm inhaling. The arms are just floating. But when I get to about shoulder height, I draw my hands in towards my body and then exhaling, as if I'm pushing against a great force or resistance. So we inhale. At about shoulder height, we draw our hands in towards our bodies. And then with the heels of the hands, as if you're pushing against the great force of resistance. On the way up, it's not even, as I mentioned, so much that we're moving our arms. It's more like they're just spontaneously being moved. And it's not even so much that we're the ones doing the breathing. Almost the breath, breathing itself. And in that feeling, in that sense of just opening myself to being moved, to being breathed, almost a sense of our becoming this sacred vessel. And through this sacred vessel, performing God's will, if you're of faith-oriented, and not faith-oriented, still works. Just doing what needs to be done that's correct and proper. But when I mentioned, well, the biblical passage of through my strength and the power of my hand, this is the opposite then. It's more egoless in its nature. Just breathing and being moved, then exhaling. One more practice is called rise and breathe. So similar, it starts out the same way, but then opening and then so inhale, sort of like a double inhalation, and then a double exhalation. Inhaling. And talk about opening the heart, opening the chest wide open. And then it's as if we're gathering all that energy into a big ball and then pushing down with the heels of the hands once again. Inhaling. A sacred teaching I heard from a meditation, one of my primary meditation teachers who had been an actor early on in his career. And he was taught early on that if you go on stage and all of a sudden, oh my God, you just get stage fright, you're paralyzed by fear, then what's the advice? He was told if that's the case, you just fling your arms wide open. Maybe almost reminiscent of what Keisha was saying earlier. God, I'm just opening myself to you, just take me. So inhaling, the opening, then the gathering of that energy, and then almost like you're pushing with the heels of your hands. It's a little compromise, obviously, we're doing it by Zoom, but on the way down, I'm also bending my knees, working my quads. And why that's important is, and only to the degree that you're comfortable, of course, but the bending of the knees is important in terms of cultivating a sense of groundedness. That in our spiritual practice, we should be blessed to just take right off. But unless you're also at the same time grounded and firmly planted on this earth, it can be quite fraught. So on the way down, we kind of bend our knees and deeply plant ourselves into the ground itself. That sense of stability, of groundedness. That whatever comes our way, and there could be tough stuff in life. There's no doubt about that, for all of us. And yet can we still have that stability, even with the tough stuff, to not be easily knocked off our feet, to have that resolve, that determination, that perseverance. The next one is called cloudy hands. So my one hand is just kind of, I have to tilt my screen just a drop here. That might be better. So I'm turning to the left, my left hand's on top. And when I turn to the right, then they switch and my right hand comes on top. Now, it might seem like I'm simply waving my hands in front of me, but I'm not. Because the motion is generated not by the arms, they're motionless virtually, but by the waist rotation. Or the shift of weight between the two legs. Now, all these Qigong moves do have a self-defense or martial arts facet to them. And again, my training was really in the hard forms. Initially, Taekwondo, and then Ninjutsu. And much later on, opening to these softer forms, the Tai Chi, the Qigong. But what's happening from a martial arts perspective in this one as if somebody's trying to grab you by the forearm and maybe, God forbid, try to pull you into an alley or into a car. And you try to tug and tug and tug. But the more you try, the worse it gets, especially with a larger opponent. But counterintuitive as it might be then, maybe it speaks to the philosophy of Aikido, that with that attack, we kind of yield to it and draw in that incoming attack or force. We direct it inward towards us. How counterintuitive. But in so doing, then and only then is the opponent in a spot where they could then be, that we could then go on the offensive. But the initial component is that yielding. And there's great wisdom in that, I believe. That sometimes there is a place in our lives for that more macho, dogged determination, I'm going to take care of business kind of attitude. Maybe that's the more masculine-like energy from a Qigong perspective, the yang energy. But sometimes it's been my experience, often it's been my experience, that there's greater empowerment from an initial softening. An initial yielding. Let's just do one final one. We're skipping, there's a whole series. The last one, though, is called restoration. We sort of gather that energy and then pump it all the way up and then exhale. So there's a certain gathering, inhaling. I'm kind of coming up on my tiptoes at the end and pumping that energy all the way up and then exhaling. Gathering that energy on the inhalation and pumping it all the way up. But then on the way down, as if we're washing our whole bodies with this golden healing light. Every cell starting to shimmer as we pass our hearts shining and shimmering. That stone-like sedimentation melting and exposing its true nature, that heart of flesh. Each cell humming, vibrating, pulsatile, luminescent. So let's all take a seat again. And I'm going to fix the screen angle. But it is nice to be able to move our bodies, you know. I thought there was a song I heard recently, and I don't know what it is about it that I just loved so much, and I just felt this need to play it today. It's about 5 minutes. We could sit or meditate on it if people are cool with that. It's kind of gospel, country, blues, I don't even know what to call it, but everything about it just feels spiritual. And maybe we'll play it if that's okay. And then we'll just sit in meditation with it. And then maybe we'll have a chance to chat a bit more before we wrap things up, if that's okay. And maybe ask as to how the practice was with the movement component. So here's the song. So just sitting in meditation with it.
times must I sit alone? How many times must I ask mercy on me? How many times must I beg to be free? Well, I'm looking for answers, looking for answers and nobody knows. Well, I'm looking for answers, looking for answers and nobody knows. Well, I'm looking for answers from above, not from below. How many times must I learn to live? How many times must I learn to love, to give? How many times must I get down on my knees to pray? How many times must I pray here to say, well, I'm looking for answers, looking for answers and nobody knows. Well, I'm looking for answers, looking for answers and nobody knows. Well, I'm looking for answers from above, not from below. Lord, I love you in so many ways. Lord, I love you each and every day. Now is the time when I must ask you why. Why must we live and why must we die? I'm looking for answers, looking for answers and nobody knows. Said I'm looking for answers, looking for answers and nobody knows. Well, I'm looking for answers from above, not from below. Oh, oh,
You know, it's quite the segue from heartfulness practice to the movement practice. And I was wondering if anyone had any thoughts to share what their experience was like doing the second half, the Qigong part.
I do.
Please.
This is Kim Golden. So my body wanted to tie it all together, the movement and the heartfulness. And I began to gather in all the unknowable, all the unanswerable, all the pain, all the joy, all the sadness into that place of compassion. And that was made easier by the movement. And what came to mind was a prayer that I had been introduced to a few years ago that I really don't know and haven't used, but maybe will incorporate, and that's the welcome prayer. I'm sure nearly everybody here has heard that. As I said, I couldn't say it right now, but I'll go pull that. And I think I would like to incorporate the movement, the welcome prayer, into the heartfulness that you've taught us. This has been terrific. Thank you.
I'm so happy. And, there was a word that we used before, and that's kind of what you're describing as well, Kim. It's not like we had part A of the class and let's just kind of drop that business and move on to part B. There is with spiritual practice, I believe it could be seamless, and even if we take sacred time for prayer and then go to work. But even if our work and our day activities are done with a certain intentionality,
Right.
then that's seamless too. It's not, well, I had my church time, my synagogue time, my mosque time, but now I got to go to work. A deeper way to think of it is all optimally, ideally seamless. So that's what you described. And, part A and part B of today, we're not separate entities at all, as you put it. Anybody else?
May I just
Okay. Catherine, go ahead, go for it.
say again? I wanted to say that in March, the House of Prayer is sponsoring a workshop on silence and the welcoming prayer.
Oh,
So that'll be something that we offer then.
so Kim was giving you a bit of a pitch there. Nice job. I'm not sure if you got paid off or not, but how cool was that?
Well, I guess that's just the way things happen.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely.
But I feel like all the kinks are out of my body, having the movement, having the prayerful movement, the heart, and it was really heart-centered movement. I mean, we kept coming back here, right?
Yeah, you're right.
So thank you. And I love this song.
Yeah, I didn't know if I was taking a chance and whether that was a little bit out there, but I'm glad to hear that.
Yeah.
Just one small thing, but it came with the song, Looking for Answers.
Yeah.
And it goes back to what, when you focused on the core, the root of the word courage is heart in French and the languages, Spanish.
Yeah.
The core of the word question is quest. So it's kind of like, oh yeah.
Well, interesting.
Keep going, keep looking.
It's amazing you're pointing that out, Sister Deborah, that, language is, we just throw words around willy-nilly, but so often there's deep wisdom in the whole thing of etymology. Where's this emerging from? And often it's deep wisdom to be learned.
Yeah.
I never would have thought of that. It seems so obvious, but I never would have thought of that one. It's right there.
Right there. Thank you.
But a quest is an interesting word, isn't it, Sister Deborah? What a quest might mean. it's like the sacred journey. What would the word quest mean to you, if you don't mind my asking?
I like to think of it as, well, yeah, kind of the search, the journey, but it's also the kind of the adventure of it, you know? And so it's not that you're lost and you have to find your way. It's more, what's the invitation, you know? What's the invitation in this quest, in this movement? So
I love the word adventure that you used. Because I hate to say it, a lot of people, when they hear about people being religious, they think it means that they're very serious and, you know, if you're religious because you're too busy being serious. But how sadly wrong I believe that to be. And, you know, the quest is this adventure. It's the adventure of our lifetime. It's the most remarkable adventure there could be. And I think in a quest, there's a certain longing in that word. And it's not we're ever done. You know, I figured it all out, and you know, I've discovered the secret to God, and you know, I'm done. My journey's done. And that's when we're 6 feet under, God forbid. So the longing itself is holy. Not just the arrival, but the journey, the longing, the pining for that connection itself is holy. In the Jewish faith, there's the Sabbath, of course, but even the prelude to the preparation for the Sabbath and the longing for the Shabbos itself can have holiness. And I'm sure that's the same in all religions, longing itself, and not just, you know, I got what I needed, satisfying my desire. Anyone else?
Yeah, you know, so I love what Sister Deborah just brought up.
Yeah.
You know, because I think about, it's like, how do I close the gap in my heart to find the union that already is there? You know, it's this connecting again to our North Star, this rootedness. It's there, right? The questions are really within us. I mean, the answers are within us. But how do I close the gap in our heart to this union that already exists? And through these practices, you know, it's like, you know, when you said, when we're faithful to our practice is faithful to us.
Yeah.
It's like keeping that thread, right? That thread consistently in our lives. And I love that, Sister Deborah, the question.
Yeah.
Wow, that's so awesome. Thank
Well,
you.
you know, it's amazing, Sister Deborah. Everyone's praising you. It should have been so obvious to all of us. But sometimes the greatest luminaries are the ones who pointed out the thing that was just in front of our noses and no one even, you know, thought of.
But when you talked about courage in the heart, it's like you set the stage.
Yeah, okay, well, good teamwork. But you know what, Nancy, it's important to be spiritual. But these days, religion has a bit more of a bad rap, and that distresses me heavily. And Michael Gillen, the physicist, theologian, I just love his stuff, often points out that in the younger generation, if they ask what religion are they, you know, Catholic, Protestant, most of them are nuns, you know, N-O-N-E, you know, nothing. I'm very spiritual, but I have no religion. Thinking that religion's a bad thing, but being plain old spiritual good, I think it's damaging to think in that way, and doesn't speak well to the viability of a society if the majority of our people are considered nuns. N-O-N-E. Gotta be careful how I spell that out, Deborah. But, you know, on that etymology kick once again, Nancy, you know, religion is a deep word. It comes from two words in
Religion.
Latin. Yeah, because
Yeah.
re is once again, and lagar comes from Latin, to connect,
Fine, yeah.
or ligation, or a legion is that which is connected.
Mhm.
So religion means that which was our birthright. But through religion and religious practice, we reconnect to that which was ours all along. And that's what you said.
Mhm. Thank you, everybody.
Well, should we just sit for a minute or two, guys, and then say goodbye to each other? How does that sound?
We had one more question.
Oh, okay, thank you.
This is Annabelle.
Hi, Annabelle.
Good to see you and good to have you here. I wanted to react to the movement part that you and I have talked about so many times. And I've got to tell you, being a kinesthetic learner, this just tapped right into me. Because movement, sitting still is in some ways very painful to me, because I want to feel the experience physically. Now, the music really tapped into me. But I just want to say it's brought something in addition to what, I've learned. But the holding, Sister Deborah knows that I'm going to do a sacred silence session in a couple of months, and I'm going to work on the idea or the feeling of holding hope and suffering together. And that's what I was feeling, because I just went to a funeral and I was feeling all of it together, the open heart and the loss. Thank you.
Everything has its time, Annabelle. We talked and kicked that idea around ages ago, but everything has its time and place, and God had to figure out how, why, when, but we made it happen. So how cool is that?
That's wonderful.
Well, let's sit for a minute, guys. How does that sound? I'd like to be punctual, and let's sit for 30 seconds, and in the silence, really, really a deep bow to all of you guys. The beautiful comments, just the beauty that each of you brought to our time together today. So really a deep sense of gratitude to you all for inviting me, for everything you do, truth be told. And the beauty of spirit that you brought to our sacred work together today. And if your eyes were closed, allowing them to open, and just a chance to wave goodbye to each other. And I'm just so grateful for this lovely afternoon together. Bye, everybody. Thank you. I hope we stay in touch, and God bless you all.
I left blessings. I left a survey in the chat. I will also email to everyone a link to this program, as well as the survey. So if you want to watch this or share this with someone else, you should get that later today or tomorrow.
Well, great. Thank you, Reverend Stephanie. Anything, feedback is always helpful. What's good, what was needed, what less, what more, what didn't resonate, what did. Feedback is always very, very helpful, and I appreciate that.
Thank you all so much.
Bye,
Have
guys.
a good week.
Take care now.
Have a good week.
God
Bye.
bless.